The fall of the wall. The edge of the container was almost invisible against the dark grains of sand piled upon it. The cork for the top rounded perfectly to fit into the narrow mouth of the device. Zhao Fei, the sorcerer of the Long Brigade, carefully placed the cork into the top and secured it shut, tugging lightly on the wax cord that hung out of the clay contraption. His face was measured and focused as he placed it next to the rest. They were going to need 12 medium pots, 11 small, and 4 large. He had already made 22 pots. This would be the 23rd. Only small pots remained to be stuffed. Picking up the small wooden, finely carved scoop with a chute down the center and a funnel at the end, he dipped it into the wooden bucket to his left, the shifting of the powder making an eerie hissing sound as the bits collided into each other. Zhao Fei's mind wandered as he grabbed one of the last few empty pots and placed the end of the funnel into the opening. He tilted it gently upwards and the sand ran seamlessly into the pot, the last fine bits sliding down the wooden chute, stacking into a pile. Zhao Fei tapped his finger lightly against the scoop, causing the shock waves to teeter and piled sand, evening it. As he did this, he placed the scoop back next to the bucket and grabbed the cork. He repeated the process of testing the cork with the cord to see if it was loose. It fit perfectly tight. Zhao Fei stretched his back as he raised from the log he was sitting on. His green and red colored robe, dabbled with black powder and dust, settled around his body. He shook off most of the remains as he turned around to gawk at the glory of his work. The 5 buckets of powder is a magnificent work of art. The colors, sounds, and power of these abominations of nature caused Zhao Fei to smile. He had spent his life learning the ways of destruction and how to contain it, mold it to his will. From a harmless, colorful explosion to a gaseous, nectared incarnation of ammonia with salt. His ways were unchallenged and met with fierce, uplifting praise for his manner of art. Today would be a new testament among the pages of his past. This would outdo all. The thought made him feel as a child once more, only briefly before returning to his mindset of murder. Zhao Fei walked towards the main command tent. The brown leather, heftily tossed over, could only be called teetering sticks, barely held up the weight. Felt as if one wrong move might cause the shelter to falter. Sao Long looked over his shoulder at Zhao Fei, opened the flap of the tent ever so gently. "Preparations are complete, then, Major?" a gruff voice dinned by the closure of the enshrouding residence. "Ready to blow these inferiors to the wind, General," Zhao Fei responded in a hiss as if to tempt the fates to try to stop this coming doom. "Then fire the signal and ready your men for the task ahead. Your perfection will be showered upon the masses by this devious exploit. We may drive these creatures from these fertile lands, thus expanding our own. My honor to serve, General. The fact my talents and demeanor are not questioned or degraded by you makes the pleasure unbequeathed to such a vagrant as I." Zhao Fei bowed and left the tent. He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a small stick with a piece of rock attached to the end. He walked to the center of the encampment where a bamboo stick wrapped with wax cord sat next to a pile of pots. Zhao Fei picked up the tube and struck the rock and the small stick against a rock protruding from the bottom of the tube next to the cord. The stones clashed together, scraping tiny pieces off of them, which burned like coals. The cord ignited, and after it ran its course, the almost silent poof of the bluish-colored streak of light that shot from the vessel. A few seconds later, a distinct sound spread across the land. Zhao Fei sat behind a rock poised upon the mouth of a stream. He didn't hear the footsteps approaching, as the water almost did not notice the treads upon it. Shi Xiao appeared before Zhao Fei. He was taken aback and hit his elbow against the rock. "Fuck, don't do that, man," Zhao Fei insisted as he rubbed his elbow. "I'm here for the fun, and it don't take that away from me." "Childish dreams from a childish man," Shi Xiao replied. "Let's go, I have a route set. Just tell me where to place the bombs." "All right, the men are just waiting. We will go in groups of 3. Told them the specifics and shown them the detailed map. "We should be set," Zhao Fei replied as he stood up looking to the sky. "A sight you will see today, good sir." "That'll be the day." Shi Xiao disapprovingly shook his head towards Zhao Fei. "The day Zhao Fei faces Zhishou in a contest of thought and loses will be the day Zhao Fei falls from this grand existence." Shi Xiao rolled his eyes as he turned around and walked back to the encampment. Zhao Fei placed the last of the explosives in his spot along the route. The sound of horses and men could be heard in the distance. The Mongols were on their way just in time. Zhao Fei clasped the striker in his hand as he brought it down upon the flint. As the spark ignited, the extended cord that stretched through the land over the hills, across the valley, and through the forest. They had spent days preparing the cord, lining before even making the clay pot explosives. They had to plan meticulously where the cords would go in order to set the bombs appropriately. Now was that moment. The fuse was lit. The time of judgment was at hand. These foul beasts from across the land would no longer be a pest before this great nation. This would scatter their attempts at a defensive stand. This technique had worked many times before, and the simple men seemed not to understand that it would continue. Xiao Fei stepped into the shadows of a rock crevice as he heard the distant sound of hissing from the cord. He sat down, and counting the seconds, he waited. The sound of the approaching army grew louder. He smiled to himself, savoring these moments. The calm before the storm, the peace before the rushing tide. The seconds drew in. The dread was so sudden, Xiao Fei didn't recognize it at first. He couldn't have been wrong on his calculations. It was not possible. It had never happened in 35 years of his studies of the black powder and the ignition process. Was there a spy? Did someone stop the cord? The thoughts rushed through his head as he sat motionless, analyzing every possible outcome. Still, the sound of the rushing army grew in his ears so much so he feared they were upon him. The rustling of trees in the distance, he saw Xiao Fei running towards him. What the fuck is going on, dude? What did you do? Xiao brandished his blade to Xiao Fei's throat. You will be the undoing of us all, traitor. Xiao slit Xiao Fei's throat, pressing the blade as deep as he could, severing his blowpipe and thrashing his blade against bone. Xiao Fei fell to the ground, legs kicking, grasping at his throat, and his eyes bulged from his head. He gurgled as the blood flowed from his flesh. Xiao smiled. The last bit of life left his body. Cao Long grabbed onto Xiao's black jacket and pulled him straight eye to eye. You did what? I killed the fucking traitor. He sold us out. The army's here. We need to leave now and tell headquarters what the fuck he did. I knew this plan was too good to be true, and so did you. We all risked everything for this, and now we have no backup plan because we wasted so much time. Xiao was hysterical and thrashed out of Cao Long's grasp and fell to the floor. Burn everything. We ride for headquarters immediately. Full speed ahead, Cao Long commanded as he walked out of the tent without giving Xiao a second look. The army was upon the gates as the remainder of the Long Brigade arrived at the Great Wall. How did they push this far into our territory? Cao Long questioned to himself as he peered around the corner of the watchtower and readied himself to sprint for the gates. He saw his opportunity and dashed. He heard the whiz of an arrow go by his head, then another. He focused and began to serpentine as he dove into the gates. He pressed himself against the inner cove of the gatehouse watchstand. The arrow struck the sturdy wood, the thudding almost as loud as Cao Long's heart in his ears. He had made it. Now he just needed to inform the higher-ups of the situation. What do you mean it's broken? Broken how? I don't understand. Execute this depraved dissenter. The Emperor spoke as he scoffed at the situation. Black powder broken? What could that even mean? It refuses to ignite and explode no matter the situation? I must go and test this myself, the Emperor thought to himself. Bring me a pot, a striker, and some powder. Tell the man, if it does not ignite, he will suffer the same fate as those 5. He growled as he stomped back towards the command center inside the guardhouse tower. Without the black powder, fighting these monsters would not be easy. The army was lazy and undisciplined, fat off the exploits of this old power that had carried their civilization. Would they be able to withstand the many enemies they had wrought upon themselves in this hubris of such power? Were this substance to no longer be viable?